Wanted to welcome everybody to Family Dynamics During Anxious Times with Brown Brothers Harriman, BBH, and their fantastic team of Kathryn George, who is a BBH partner, and Ellen Perry. I am Elaine Ubiña, co-founder of Fairfield County Look, and I am going to hand it right over to Kathryn. Thanks again for coming. We're going to send out a recording of this with our weekly newsletter, and as well as in the thank you to all of our attendees. So taking it away, Kathryn.
Thank you, Elaine. And thank you all for joining us today. As Elaine said, I'm a partner of Brown Brothers Harriman, and I oversee our multifamily office. And while our core job is preserving and growing our clients' assets, my focus is to help our clients on the issues at the intersection of their wealth, their family, and their lives. And so you can imagine that we have been very busy over the last 3 months. Ellen and I are thrilled to be here today to discuss how to deal with family dynamics and anxiety during COVID, and more recently, during this period of social unrest here and abroad. As we all know, family dynamics can be challenging even in the best of times. The stress associated with the global health crisis and such significant disruption in how we work and how we live just accentuates the issues already inherent in family relationships. Anxiety is very personal, but many of us are experiencing similar sources of stress or concern, including the health of elderly parents we can't see, the fact that we laid off employees, and because our children are depressed over their isolation from their friends, missing graduations, and wondering if they'll be able to go back to school in the fall. We've been unexpectedly living together with children and parents sharing meals, space, and in my house, limited Wi-Fi. And so while there's so many silver linings that we can't lose sight of, it's incredibly normal to feel anxiety and to have that anxiety impact our family dynamics. We're so lucky to have our BBH senior advisor, Ellen Perry, here with us today. Ellen has a degree in family systems theory and a 20-year history advising families on practices that will help them thrive for generations in good times and bad. She's written a book that I encourage you all to read entitled A Wealth of Possibilities, Navigating Family, Money, and Legacy, and brings just so much experience working with families, including many that I've had the opportunity to engage with her on. So she's going to speak for 15 minutes or so just on topics related to families and anxiety, and then we're going to go to Q&A. We received a few in advance, and I would love if you have more, if you could use the chat feature here and just lob them in. We're happy to answer any questions that you have. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Ellen.
Thank you, Kathryn, and thank you all for being here. This is my favorite thing to do, is have these kinds of conversations. As Kathryn said, I'm intensely interested in family dynamics and this intersection, as she said, of family and wealth and anxiety, and certainly we're experiencing that right now. I want to just also reiterate, this is an extraordinarily complex time, unprecedented. We have never in this country have overlapping crises of healthcare, medical, economic, social, racial unrest, the upheaval that comes with the unemployment. We've never had this before. And so we're all trying to figure out how to do our very best in this moment. And it's not always easy. I know for myself, I am muddling along in spite of feeling like I have a fair amount of experience with some of these issues. I don't have experience with this moment in time. And so it's complex, and I think we need to acknowledge that. So let me start by doing two things. I want to give a short primer on the neuroscience of anxiety and on family systems theory. So let me give a quick overview about anxiety, because I think we all need to know more about it right now. So anxiety in the brain lives in what's called the amygdala, which is at the base of the brain. It's the fear center. It's the fight, flight, freeze center of your brain. It's when you sense threat, that's what is activated. Certainly for myself, I get clues, or what I would call tells, that I'm anxious, because I don't always know I'm anxious. I often think I'm doing just fine. And so for me, the tells when I'm anxious are that my sleep, my eating, or my breathing are different. Either I'm breathing, my trick is I breathe like only from here to here. There's no lung involvement at all. It's just these little shallow breaths. Or I'm not sleeping. I wake up at 3 in the morning, my eyes fly open, I'm wide awake, and my brain starts doing the hamster thing. Or my eating is disrupted. For some people, they eat less. I don't do that. I stand at the kitchen and eat crackers out of the box, or go foraging in my husband's chocolate drawer for some sort of remnants of what he's left behind. So those, for me, when I start noticing that I'm experiencing those, then I know I'm anxious, because I don't always know it. And I think some of you might experience that as well. The other piece about when the amygdala is activated and you're in this place is that the prefrontal cortex, which is the get the job done part of your brain, it's planning, it's good judgment, it's complex thinking, it's logical thinking, it's the linear part of the brain. When your amygdala is really involved, your prefrontal cortex is not getting the energy that it needs. So I also know when I'm anxious to not rely on my own decision making to be as crisp and clear and strong and good as it would be under normal circumstances. So Kathryn and I have talked a lot about this. One of my tricks when I'm super anxious, but I have to make decisions, is I rely on somebody else's prefrontal cortex too, right? I'll reach out to a colleague or a friend to help me think something through. And just another little trick that I use. So that's a little bit of anxiety, and some of you may see that happening in your lives right now and in your homes right now. And when you add to that the dynamics of family, it gets even more interesting and complicated. So let me spend a minute on family systems theory. So your family of origin is the most intense set of emotional relationships you'll ever have in your life. By that, I mean that your emotional reactivity to your parents and your siblings is extraordinarily high. It doesn't mean you love them more than you love other people in your life. It just means you're really reactive, right? I would call that being emotionally hinged to your parents and your siblings, right? You know this if you think about it for a minute, right? Small gestures, when your mother looks at you a particular way, or your father just murmurs something, like a at the wrong time, can send you right off the rails. Your children have that same thing with you, right? It isn't just you with your parents and you with your siblings. It's your kids with one another and your kids with you. And so in this time when many of us are living back with our adult children or with our parents, some of us have siblings living at home as well. It's so complicated and so ripe for this perfect storm of heightened anxiety and fear and these family dynamics coming together that becomes really complex and combustible. So we're going to talk a little bit about what we do, but we can get triggered really easily. And so being able to get a little bit of what I would call purchase on the situation, to be able to just step back and to be able to see what's going on. Oh, I just had that reaction because my dad did that thing around I felt judged about the way I'm parenting my kids in front of my dad, or whatever. Makeup and your adult children, we're going to talk more about this, are often back living in their childhood beds. I mean, really talk about a metaphor for messing up. Your adult children who are launched and on their way have had to hit the pause button and come home and go back into their childhood beds, right? Living with their parents who are telling them what to do again. And so we're together in ways that are full of opportunity. And I think a lot of us think about the silver lining of this, right? I'm not on airplanes as much anymore. Kathryn, I know you're not. Like, we have this moment where we're back with our families, and it feels like it's a great opportunity, and it's also really complicated. So understanding that. I want to say another thing. I will say something about paradox. So there's a paradox in that. It is both the worst of times and also a lovely opportunity. And paradox for most of us is hard to hold. We don't like paradox. We want to go to one end or the other. Things are good or bad, true or false. We don't tend as human beings to hold paradox particularly well. And I think that's what we're stuck in right now. It's a moment of tremendous paradox for many of us. Young people are really struggling. We can talk a little bit about that more in the future in a few minutes. But boy, young adults who have moved home are really having a hard time. And they ought to be. Developmentally, they're supposed to be launched. They're not supposed to be home right now. And so their work is the work of individuation. It's not of coming home and being collaborative with you again. They're supposed to be off doing what they're supposed to be doing. Think of it yourself. When you were 21 or 23 or 25, if you had to move home back with your parents under these kinds of conditions, it would have been incredibly challenging. And so I think that calls upon us to be particularly understanding of them. And we can talk more about what that could look like. But let me pause there for a minute. Kathryn, do you want to interject, or should we take some questions?
Well, I think you've done a great job of setting forth what the issue is and why the issue is what it is. But what's your advice? How do we deal with these family dynamics? In particular, I know a lot of people that are on this call do have adult children or, teenage children. And so it's interesting because we're pivoting a little bit from our primary concern being our kids being annoyed and mad that they're home. And, you've given a lot of advice to our clients around, you got to give them a break, don't expect as much, don't make them learn something new.
Right.
To this safety issue associated with them wanting to go out and be with their friends, and in many cases going out with their friends. But I want to first start with just the advice for us all living together and how to deal with conflict and how to approach those family dynamics. And then we can shift to, the world opening and what do we do about that?
Great. So let me talk for a second about what Kathryn alluded to, which is I think that we need to just be easy with each other because this is such a difficult time. This is not the moment to hold your kids to the highest standard you've ever had. I'm not saying that you give them a pass on everything, but when we first started this, I was hearing from a lot of parents saying, I want my kids to learn Mandarin, or, now's a great time. They could really get those classes going towards the degree after this degree. Most people don't have the space. They don't have the prefrontal cortex for it right now, but they also are really devastated. It's terrifying and they don't have the space. And so my advice is everybody just take a deep breath, right? We're just all muddling through this. And so if your kids don't want to have dinner with you every night, don't make them have dinner with you every night. If they don't want to go on the hike or the this or the picnic or the that, don't make them. Let them have some agency in their own lives. They were used to having a lot of agency themselves before they came back in. I would suggest you make agreements with them. And this also speaks to part of what I think around as the world opens back up and we need to assess our risk tolerance. And you may have a different risk tolerance with your kids, but I'll speak to that in a second. Make agreements with your kids about what seems reasonable. So you're not making dinner every night and they're not showing up. That feels disrespectful. That doesn't feel good. I wouldn't suggest that, but make some agreements with them about what feels reasonable to them and what feels reasonable to you. But let's talk for a minute about the world's opening back up again. Now, what the heck do we do? Because it was really clear when the experts said, wear a mask, stay home, 6 feet apart, don't go out. That was clear. We knew what to do. Now it's all over the place. So what do we do? And we just have been working on a piece around this. So at the heart of it is the following. We all have a different personal risk tolerance. I might be really comfortable with risky behavior and you may not. I may not wear a seatbelt. I might smoke. I might heli-ski. I might jump out of airplanes. I might not be worried about this. You may be the complete opposite. This may worry you for good reason or just because you're more worried. You're less risk tolerant. And in a family, that's one thing if I just am managing that for myself. But if I'm now part of a family who are living together, my risky behavior impacts your health and well-being, then I think we have a very different conversation to have. And I know this is hard with young people because they are so sick of being home. They can barely stand it. They want to get out and stay out. They miss their friends. They miss all of the things they were supposed to be doing. But I do think that having a family meeting, if you will, a family conversation, which says, how are we going to do this going forward? And because the facts change every couple of weeks, my own advice is make agreements with your family members that last a week or two, not more. You can't decide what you're going to be doing in August. My husband and I were having this conversation the other day. One of our older kids wants to come visit us in August at a house that we've rented. And she's planning on doing some traveling between now and then and being with people who have very different risk profiles than we did. And she wanted to know if she could come stay with us for a week. And I said, I don't know. I think we have to address it when we get closer and see what's happening in the country, in the states where you've been and what your choices have been. And it didn't feel so good, but I think it's the right choice for me for that. But I think making some agreements with your kids. I don't think just because they're itchy and they want to get out, they have total power to decide what kind of risk to bring back into your house. So it's really hard because you don't want them to go someplace else. At the same time, you want to give them some freedom. So how do you make some agreements with them? How do you get them to talk to their friends? Because again, they're with people you don't know what they're doing. And so this really calls upon us to have hard conversations and a lot of transparency. And difficult conversations are hard. You're muted.
I think this is at the crux of the hard work that you do, which is managing conflict in a family. And so maybe you could speak, whether it's about when you go out in COVID or anything that you disagree with family members on, can you talk a little bit about how to deal with conflict in a family?
Yeah. So it's particularly up right now because a lot of family members disagree on some of these issues, some of the race issues, some of the COVID issues, right? We've got grandparents and grandchildren who can't speak to each other. We've got parents and their siblings who aren't talking. We've got a lot of difficulty with this. So I think the key around conflict and difficult conversations has 2 or 3 components. One, and where I always like to start, is with self. I like to look at what part I have in a difficult conversation before I start looking at everybody else, which is not where I want to start. I want to start with what you're doing wrong, really, honestly. I'm very clear on what you're doing to contribute to my difficulty. I'm usually not nearly as clear on what I'm contributing. But if I can see that whatever it is that I'm doing is getting in the way here, then I can begin to potentially change how I approach it. For sure, having conversations, not putting it under the rug, is important. Having regular conversations about these difficult issues is essential. Making the space for it, saying I want to have a conversation with you about this, so marking it. Talking, using emotional language, I feel this way, as opposed to you're doing this, right? I statements. I feel judged. I feel frightened of our relationship. The reason we don't have difficult conversations with people that we care about is because at our core, we're afraid that the conversation is going to escalate and the relationship is going to be lost. That's why we usually don't do it. Sometimes we don't do it because we don't want people to know what we're really thinking, but mostly we don't have a hard conversation because we're not confident that the relationship can withstand the difficult conversation or the outcome of the difficult conversation. So we would rather not say anything than to risk it. And so, but the opposite is actually true. We're closer. Anyone who's married and who's had a hard conversation in your marriage usually knows on the other side you feel better and closer. And so finding the time to have it, you don't just tack it on in the kitchen when you're making dinner together. And oh, by the way, I'm furious with you about X, Y, Z, right? I want to talk to you. So you make a time, you talk about yourself, you ask questions, you remain curious about what they see, and you listen.
So a lot of the times the issue is one of control, right? Because I know at least 2 of the 3 people on the screen are control freaks. And I would guess that you too? Okay, Elaine too. I would guess that many of our participants are as well. And we are in a time right now where we simply don't have control over a lot of things. So how do we manage through that?
Oh, I hate this topic because I am a control freak. When people say just breathe, I'm like, I don't breathe. Like I like wrestle it. So this is very hard for me. But I would say a couple of things. One, I have learned that control is really about fear. I try to control things to control my own fear, right? And so in this moment, here's an exercise I do, and a colleague teacher of mine has really helped me with this. So the opposite of fear is not bravery. The opposite of fear is trust. So what is it in this moment that I can trust? And maybe that helps me let go of some of the control need if I can articulate what I trust. So for me now, I make a little mental list about what I trust. So I trust that I'm safe. I trust that I have good health care. I trust that I love the people I live with and I can take care of them and they can take care of me. I trust that I have enough food. I trust that I have enough money. I can list off the things, and that can calm me down, make me feel a little less controlling, number one. Number two, I control the things I can. Like I think about what I'm going to do today. What can I control in today or tomorrow, right? What am I going to do? I make a little list. That makes me feel slightly more in control. When I start thinking about the fact that in January, I might still be in the same situation, I get squirrely. And so I try not to think about January right now. I try to think about what I can control and what I can trust.
So when we talk about control, particularly in the context of our children, it's all because there's certain outcomes that we want for our kids, right? And I think what we all agree on is that we want to raise responsible and independent and productive adults. And that, in the uncertain world that we live in and what our kids are being exposed to, I think there's a lot of fear about how that's going to happen. And you spent your life thinking about how to do that and you talk about living your values and having your children see you live your values as a way to ensure that. And so I'd love just to have you give your thoughts to everyone on that topic.
About passing your values on to the next generation. And so, I love this topic. I love the topic of values. And I have spent a lot of time thinking about it, and I still do. I do in this moment too. But the sun's kind of bothering me, so I'm going to scooch around here so I don't get quite as much sun in my face. Thanks. So our values, let me define our values for a second. Our values are our highest order priorities. They're the things that we will sacrifice much for. They're the 2 or 3 or 4 organizing principles of our lives that are the North Star, that are the way in which we make the major decisions of our lives. Those are our values. And in my book, I talk about this. I differentiate values from preferences in that our preferences are the way we operationalize or the way we express our values. So as an example, a value is spirituality. A preference would be if I'm a Buddhist or a Catholic or an Episcopalian or I'm Jewish. That's the way in which I express the value of spirituality or a belief in the divine. And so I think for all of us right now, particularly those who are living with adult children who might look and feel like they were expressing some different values than you have, trying to pick your eyes up off your toes, if you will, out of the weeds of preferences and look more at the way in which you might have values that are similar, that are expressed differently, is a really, really good exercise, right? Because if we get down into the weeds of preferences too much with your kids, particularly, everybody looks different, right? A Catholic that goes to Mass every single day, who's not going to Mass these days, but looks very different than one who goes on holidays. When they believe in the same God and they pray the same book and they sing the same hymns. And so when our kids are home right now and they are expressing themselves differently, I would A, look to where there's similarities as opposed to differences. B, where there are differences, get curious about your kids. I mean, I think this is an amazing opportunity to get to know your adult children in ways that you don't when they're launched and gone and you see them for a shorter amount of time. And so, to the extent you can not feel as threatened by their differences as you might be inclined to, I think that's a good thing. I think number two, this is not a steady state time. And so your kids are angry and potentially acting out. And so I would suggest that we all try not to extrapolate some of the behavior that we're seeing in them now or the opinions that we're seeing them now. Don't spin that into the future to say, oh, geez, look what's happened to him. He's now fill in the blank. This is a really unprecedented time, and none of us are our best. Like, we really just...
You've given me some great advice on that I've used. And I think my kids know when I do certain things, they think I've talked to Ellen. And a lot of it has to do with this idea with adult kids of not being able to make decisions for them. And when you don't agree with their decisions, ask them about it, ask them about their thought process. And you may learn something in the process, but whenever I do that, they say, oh, you've been talking to Ellen. So let's talk about the, what's going on in the world right now. And one of the things that we said we talk about is how we have different difficult conversations, not just with our family, but with our friends, with our parents, around racism and around what's going on. And whether it's a BBHer or whether it's someone outside, the thing I hear the most is the question, I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
So how do I say something?
Yeah.
And so it would be great. And just for all of you here, Ellen spoke to all of our employees on this topic. We asked Ellen to come in and facilitate a conversation that I had with her around how to have conversations in the workplace about race. And it was phenomenal. And I think, it's the culture that we wanted, and we were struggling with how to help people. And what you said was very impactful. So I would love for you to share it with the people here.
I'm glad to hear that. Thank you. Well, so I would say, let's make a premise here. When you say have difficult conversations, if you're talking to someone who is African American specifically, let's just kind of name it. It may not be the only difficult conversation you have about that, but in this one in particular, I would say, if you're not African American, keep yourself out of it. Right? You do not have a similar lived experience, and so to try to empathize, sometimes we all say, oh, I had this experience and it's not the same. And so I would not try to connect that way. And I know that's a way in other situations I often try to connect myself, is to look for a way in which I've had a similar experience and bring that into the conversation. This isn't a moment to do that. So unless you are African American, I would not suggest that you try to connect that way. I would, what I do is I acknowledge that my lived experience is not the same as yours. And I would say that I get it. My lived experience is not the same as yours, but I want you to know that I care about you, I support you, I love you, whatever the right terminology is for the relationship. And I want to be here for you. So tell me how I can do that, right? And I think that is an invitation that can be heard for what it is. And I think that is a beginning that allows you into the next part of the conversation. It's keeping yourself out of it. It's acknowledging that your experience is different, but it's also stating, I really care about you.
Right. And so now, but switching to a conversation that you're having with someone who there is a difference of opinion.
Yeah.
And, my husband was approached by someone at a dinner and who asked him, did you have to write one of those CEO letters everyone has to write? And it was very quickly going to become a not great conversation. And so, as I said before, I was thinking, hey, what would Ellen have us do in this situation? I just pinched his arm and said, this is not our house. We are not having a conversation. But to give us your thoughts on, where there's conflict, where you have different views, where things get political, what is the right approach?
Well, I know your husband, so I bet you would have said, I didn't have to write a CEO letter. I wanted to write that.
Yes,
I happen to
that
know
is what he said.
one of the principles that he is. And so I would say, well, I will tell you, this goes into something else you and I have talked about, Kathryn. Recently, an old friend of mine, sent me a cartoon that I found offensive. And he texted it to me, and I turned around, I texted right back and said, I found this incredibly offensive. Please don't ever send me anything like this again. It was clear as the bell. He came back instantly and said, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize it. Of course, you're right. I never will. Called me, texted again, was mortified. I think that we need to be clear about our boundaries. Not everyone has the same risk tolerance around certain conversations, certain whatever. And so I think this is a moment to be really clear about your own boundaries. The second part of it is, what happens if you end up in a conversation you don't want to be in? And I think that, again, as clearly and simply as you can, to say, this doesn't feel like the right moment, the right context, the right environment for this conversation, right? A cocktail party is not the right place to take some of these up. Or asking for a pause. You know what? This is a pretty interesting topic. It's also quite serious. I'm not quite ready for this conversation yet. Let me think about it. I might circle back with you about it. You don't have to be in any conversation you don't want to be in. All you really need is the language to stop it, right? Which you've got. You can say, this is interesting. I'm not sure I'm in the right place for this conversation right now.
Yep, that's great advice.
You're in control.
That's great advice. But switching to the kids, right? So I think for our children, where this is playing all out over social media, and kids are getting bullied for posting, kids are getting bullied for not posting, kids are getting bullied for not posting enough, the kids are getting bullied for posting a picture on the beach in the middle of all of this. What advice do you have for parents to help kids navigate this?
This is so hard, Kathryn. This is a really hard one. They live their lives on social media, many of them. And it feels as if, as you say, they're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't. There's really no right choice, because in any event, they're going to offend someone. And so again, I just think trying to engage them in a conversation about what the right path for them is. I know young people who've shrunk their friends, their online friends, it's on Facebook and others, because they feel as if this is not a moment for the masses to be communicating with the masses. That if they're not actually really close friends, there's too much room for misunderstanding. And so I know some other young people who've made different decisions. I think the best you can do is help them think it through and not just be reactive. Right? What's the goal of posting? What are you trying to do? Are you trying to show support for a hand? Is it about your identity? Is it about your wanting people to see you as a compassionate human being? What's the goal of so get to the what, then you can get to the how, or get to the why, I guess, is even where you start. You get to the why of why they're doing it. Then try to move through the what are you going to do and how are you going to do it? And I think that can help them figure out how to engage with it.
Would you give the same advice to the kids at the dinner table as you did to someone saying, I don't like that post, don't ever send it to me again? Because I think a lot of these debates are happening at the family dinner table, and especially grandparents and grandchildren. And, how do you keep family relationships intact while at the same time, being open to talking about these really important things?
So I would probably handle it different at the dinner table than I would with someone sending me a text. They're my closest people at the dinner table. So I would probably explore it more. I mean, the particular post that the person sent me is not something I would explore at my dinner table with them. But in general, I get your point, which is, there's a possibility of a deeper understanding. One of the things that I really love about the difference between grandchildren and grandparents is their experiences are so different, and often the grandchildren don't understand what the grandparents have had to go through to get to where they are right now. That informs their opinions. Yeah. So they're looking at them in 2020 and saying, Grandpa's a dinosaur, are you kidding? Like, they can't believe that. But look back at what he was doing in his 20s and 30s. His life is so profoundly impacted by that, right? We're profoundly impacted by our histories. And often grandchildren don't understand exactly the life experience that they have had. And so it's kind of a rich opportunity. And also, grandparents don't often always understand grandchildren all that well. And, that the great line of, I can't remember who it was, said, I'm getting old at just the right time. Some grandparents are shaking their heads right now and saying, oh my gosh, this is all too much for me right now.
I had one client tell me that the best piece of advice that you gave them was that we should all be learning from our children. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Oh my gosh, stay curious right this minute. They are the most adaptable generation that I think that we have seen in quite a long time. They have the ability to pivot and to iterate and to adapt in ways that are fantastic, and we can learn from them. And so I would be trying to think about what they know and how they think and where they're going. And if you can get underneath their fear that they're never going to get a job and they're never going to leave home and they're going to be in your basement forever, they have much to say and much to share with us. They are incredibly adaptable. They also have the most diverse set of friends in probably any generation. And so, I know my daughter is in theater, and her friends are fantastically different. And as you know, one of my strong beliefs about families that thrive over multiple generations are those that embrace diversity well in the family and without. But those that, as my language is, they pitch a big tent. There's room at the table for everyone. And it's not that they tolerate difference. Tolerance is not actually the same as embracing difference. And so those that can embrace differences have really stable families. And I think in this moment, if we look at our adult kids, they have an incredibly diverse set of friends, which makes them really interesting.
I think another direct way to make that same point is to say that if you don't embrace the difference that your kids bring to the table, they're going to go to someone else's table, which none of us want that.
None of us. And if your kids can't be embraced at your table for who they are, not for who you want them to be, then they go find a different dinner table that will accept them.
Right. And that's been one of the beauties of COVID, because these adult kids are coming back and you're seeing them for prolonged periods of time. And you see they're still that same child, but they're just doing their own thing. My oldest son taught me to cook. So a question has come in, and I want to remind everyone to use the Q&A feature if you have questions. But when you were answering the questions about kids and social media, do you feel the same way about companies and businesses? How should they be approaching this? How many times do I have to post? And after every event, do I have to post? And, is that necessary to show your values to your client base, that you have to publicly make these pronouncements?
I think that this is a moment that corporations absolutely ought to figure out how to broadcast their values, whatever they are, in whatever form they feel is right. Does it have to be social media? No, maybe not. Maybe it's outreach to clients and vendors directly. I don't know, but I think this is a moment for people to stand up and make their values clear.
That's good advice. It's hard though.
So here's the problem: is in the absence of facts, we all make up stories to fill in the blank. So if you're not telling people what your values are, they're making up the story about what your values are.
But that's what's happening with the kids.
Yeah.
Exactly what's happening with the kids. If they are not posting, people are making assumptions that they're, of how they feel.
Right. Well, yes, in their giant universe of friends.
Yeah. They're 2,000 followers.
2,000 followers. I mean, most of whom they wouldn't agree to have dinner with if they showed up in the same city on the same night. And so that's a whole different issue, right? I think there is a difference between corporate responsibility and identity and kids and social media. I don't know exactly what the difference is, but it feels like there's something there that's different.
So Ellen, I'm going to ask you just two more questions. The first being, we talk about helping families thrive for generations. And I'd love if you could just speak for a few more minutes about that. I mean, obviously the being accepting of diversity, I think, is super important. but also finding ways to stay connected?
Yeah. So I think that there are a couple of truths, excuse me, that I've learned around families that thrive for multiple generations. They connect meaningfully. And so the notion of thinking about how you can connect to your children, your grandchildren, your siblings, ongoing and meaningfully. Maybe a post, on Instagram isn't enough. Maybe you need to fill in the blank, whatever it is. So connection is essential. And you can't do it. You can't do it without thought. Do it thoughtfully and intentionally. So connection is one. Emotional intelligence. Understand emotional complexity in yourself, in your family. Understand the part you play in emotional complexity, as we talked about earlier, emotional complexity. For those of you who are younger, intentional parenting, all the way through, actually, even with adult children. Kathryn, you and I have talked a lot about this pivot point when you go from parenting children to parenting adult children. It demands a very different sort of parenting, more collaborative, more curious, less directive. You don't tell them what to do, you ask them what they think they ought to do. But that idea of how do you parent, intentional parenting is really important. The idea of pitching a big tent and embracing diversity is really important. The whole idea of a vision of what I want my family to look like in reality, as opposed to the polished up version, right? What's this mean to me to be connected to these people, and how am I going to stay connected to them? What are we up to together? I think all of those things help families stay connected. And this, again, we talked about keeping people at your dinner table because you see them for who they are.
So on the subject of being connected, and I know this is something that we do with families all the time, and I always like to ask you and tell you, what is the single piece of advice that you would give to a parent of an adult child around improving their relationship? Wait, before you get that, a question just came in and I want to make sure that you get a chance to answer it, which is, how do you mend fences? Which is related to the question actually that I just asked. It's a total tee up. How can we mend fences with family during this time?
Yeah. So here's my favorite question of all time to ask. You can ask it of, I think, any child over the age of 16 probably, but you can ask it of any family member, and just not your kids. It can be of your parents, it can be of your siblings, it can be of your nieces and your nephews, your cousins. And it's this: what can I do more of or less of that will make you feel close to me? What can I do more of, or what can I do less of that will make you feel close to me? Then this is the tricky part. Whatever they say, you say, thank you so much for telling me that. What you don't say is, what do you mean? I don't do that, or I don't say that, or that is really, you've so misunderstood me. That's not what you do. You say, thank you so much, no matter what they say. And then you think about it and go back to them for a follow-up. I think it is rich with possibility for a deeper relationship. And you could be surprised. They may tell you what they'd like you to do more of, right? They might tell you what they'd like you to do less of, but boy, is there an opportunity for closeness. And you've got these moments for some of you who are living at home with your kids or your extended family members right now. And then maybe they'll ask you the same thing back.
And I think on the question here about mending fences, the I'm sorry, and then what can we do to improve the relationship, I think is a very powerful way to move things forward and not just focus on whatever it was that caused the fence to break. Mm-hmm. We're talking about rebuilding the fence and growing together.
We need to go forward. Absolutely. Right.
Do you have any parting words, or Elaine, do you have any final questions for us?
Hi. Oh my gosh, Ellen, that was beyond. I can't even tell you. I'm a little weepy. So fantastic. We all really enjoyed it. I've been getting texts left and right. People are loving this. tell us about your book and where we can find that.
Just on the weepy thing, can I just say, I'm crying like 3 times a day.
Yeah.
I cry all the time. It's just really, I'm going to cry right now. It's like, anyway, on to the book. The book is called A Wealth of Possibilities. It's on Amazon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. We will all look for it. You're fantastic. And do you ever do sessions with families? How does that all work? Or are you strictly with BBH? How does that work?
So I think you can follow up with Kathryn or with BBH. Oh, we're all crying. I just heard that.
I hear about people going out to their cars and crying.
I'm so appreciative that everyone joined. So thank you. And Elaine, thank you so much. And Kathryn.
Thank you.
I'll tell you one other thing that I think we've done a lot of these sessions with families and with that we work with and other groups. And one of the topics that comes up a lot is building relationships virtually. And I think that's been a silver lining of COVID, that we maybe even communicate with people more than we used to, doing grandparent Zoom chats and all of that. But I think, there's also some ways that you can even take that further that, Ellen has talked a lot about that we can share with you. Because, I think we're going to be in the state for a while, and I know that it's an important topic. So I'm seeing all these texts. Everybody's literally crying. So as I always say, it's not a good meeting unless we cry.
I don't usually cry.
Success for me is tears.
Yeah. So much, and we'd love to have you back. Hopefully, we'll have a regroup in September, and we can all catch up on our summers, see where we are.
Ellen, do you want to close?
I just want to say one thing in closing, Elaine, which is, all the comments about crying made me realize that I didn't say this, and I really wanted to, which is, I think we all need to take a deep breath and acknowledge how hard this is on us. A lot of us are feeling like we are dancing as fast as we can to keep our families healthy, and just every single piece. Many of us are kind of type A and want to do this right. And this is exhausting and upsetting and frightening. And I think that we need to be kind to ourselves in the process. So that's my last thought about it. It's just be kind. We're all busy being kind. I think we need to be kind to ourselves.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Elaine, for having us.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Take good care.